People think that we actually have free will, like we have a choice. This is where it gets a little controversial because most of you want to believe that you have the ability to choose your life's path. But this is where it gets interesting, is that how do you actually make your decisions? Most people, they actually will envision the scenario and see how they will feel about it. So this is the problem with that. How you feel, what that is, the words feelings are actually just your brain chemicals. Things like dopamine, serotonin, epinephrine. But what dictates how much and when these brain chemicals are released? That's your subconscious programming. It could be what's built into your DNA or how you've been programmed. How much of these brain chemicals are secreted is going to determine how you feel about something. So that actually determines the choices that you make. It really influences it. And it's crazy because you need to understand that you're being reprogrammed every day, which means that the decisions you're making are being influenced. But here's the thing. We have a gift, and our higher power, our God, has given us this gift of free will. But there's been some controversy, especially in the coding world. I have a coding background, and there's a controversy on randomness. Is there really random numbers? Because in the coding world, it's actually just an algorithm. There's just an algorithm that figures out what looks to be a random number, but is actually based on some sort of pattern. The more sophisticated models will actually pull something in the real world, like maybe a position of the mouth, maybe of the mouse, the weather outside, just to give the perception of randomness. But it's really not random. And that's the thing with our decisions and our free will. It's not random. Because our subconscious programming dictates it, it's based on an algorithm, it's not random. But how did our higher power, our God, give us free will? Well, that's with our spiritual desires, the 4 keys. Because lower life forms, they act on impulse. They act on their programming alone. When they have the desire to do something, they act on it. And you can even see that in children, before they're developed. They don't think about repercussions, they just kind of do. And animals are the same way. They have an instinctual guide that tells them they want to do something, and they do it. Of course, safety comes into play, survival comes into play, but regardless, at the end of the day, that decision is based on instinct. But as a human, we have the 4 keys. We have our spiritual desires, and sometimes they conflict with our physical desires, that subconscious programming, and sometimes they align. So when they conflict, you actually have a choice. You have a choice on what decision to make. If it's going to fulfill your long-term happiness, your spiritual desires, or if it's going to fulfill your physical desires, which are all made up of survival and having the species thrive. But that confliction, that choice, is what gives us the perception of free will. But it gives us the ability to choose whether to walk on the path of our purpose and our higher power, or walk on the path of what stimulates us on this planet.